Get a life, nerd.
Everybody, Alkali Lake here, and on today's edition of Nerd Up Level Up, we are going to be talking cosplay and doing yet another tutorial. I'm really excited for this one because this is part of my Urel-inspired cosplay that I made for the 2020 TwitchCon cosplay contest, which was called GlitchCon. And we're going to be talking about how I made the hip pauldron today. I have it right here, and I love this piece. It's so beautiful. It turned out really well. It has color shifting paint, so depending on how you look at it, sometimes it's purple, sometimes it's pink, and sometimes you can see in the ivory part that it'll glint purple or it'll glint pink. So really cool piece, and it also lights up. So I handcrafted the pauldron and everything about it from just something in my mind. And so that's what's really cool about cosplay. And something I want to teach you today is how to take a two-dimensional piece from a drawing that you make on cosplay foam and how you turn it into an actual cosplay piece. If you notice on this one, it is inverted. So meaning that it is curved right here. And then in the middle, it actually inverts in and comes back out. So that's a design element that I added into the build to add some interest. And I'll talk to you about how I did that. So I hope you enjoy this cosplay tutorial. Here is some behind the scenes slow motion video of Urel in action. This is me in natural light so you can get a good feel of the colors. I really wanted you to see this so that you can know that there are upcoming videos to showcase other pieces of the cosplay as well, especially the shoulder pauldrons, the horns, and many other components. First off, I started with a pattern that I hand drew. I based this off of drawings that I saw of Urel in-game and out of game, and from different artists who enjoy drawing her, and I created my own pattern. I wanted this cosplay to be inspired by Urel and not a direct copy from any of the games. You can see the pattern here, and I chose to cut it out into the different pieces. One thing you need to do is understand different levels of the piece, which pieces are going to be higher and which pieces are going to be lower. This is often called elevations, different levels of height or lowness inside a piece. Here, I decided to bevel out a section. You can watch another video on that I did previously about how to make bevels. This will allow me to curve this piece and glue the inner connections of this bevel together. But what I've told myself is I want this part of the cosplay to indent or become a valley. And that's what I was showing in the opening intro of the video, is how this particular piece curved in. And you can see I'm taking the weldwood contact cement here and I'm putting this on the curved valley, and then I'll just glue it together. And then I get a nice inverted piece here. A lot of this will be confusing, so make sure to watch it back. But basically, I just took my pattern and cut it into different pieces that would be different elevations of the finished piece, telling myself which pieces were higher and lower. That way I could separate them out and understand the differences of how they were going to come together. If you want pieces to curve or come, in or out away from your body, you often want to heat shape them first. But sometimes just putting pieces together in a 3D way will often create a curve on its own. As you can see with this top piece here, when I put it into this V-shaped section, it's going to automatically curve because it can't help but not curve. And these are things that you learn through trial and error and experience. And I had actually never made a piece like this either. It was just in my mind, and I drew it out on that cosplay foam, and I was actually very surprised to see how nicely it came together here. This next step, I am just heating it so I can curve it even more how I want. Gluing the pieces together formed a curve on its own, but now I really want the bottom part to curve in more, and then I'm going to heat the top part and I'm going to really force in my hands on the back, and you can see I'm putting a lot of effort in here to squish this piece into place. This next part was my least favorite part of the entire design. I think I still have some PTSD from it. But I wanted the cosplay to have a recurring theme through it, and I was looking to have this sort of accordion-like effect in many places and this very layered look with panels of different just layers and levels. So I created this effect where I layered tiny strips of foam. This is 2mm cosplay foam, and I layered it over the sections. And then as each section was completed, the pieces were a little bit too big, so I made sure to trim them down to fit the area. But it was was pretty simple. They were 3/4 inch pieces of 2mm cosplay foam, cut into tiny strips, overlaid over top of each other, applied with contact cement, and then the excess was cut off along my draw lines where I had made the lines of where I want the piece to fit. Next up, we get to dissecting the rest of the pattern that I had rough drawn out onto the 2mm cosplay foam. Well, actually, you can find this foam in any section of any craft store, usually in the children's section. It's usually in these like kindergarten colors. You can tell that I took the pattern that I originally drew on the design that I made, and I just replicated it onto the piece that I was creating. Here I am taking 2mm craft foam and I am creating another elevation. I talked about elevation earlier, and it's just different levels of heights on your cosplay. And then you always do the highest elevation last. That's usually trim pieces. So you can see here that I took the red foam and I'm creating these lines that are going to lead into this kind of inverted center of the hip pauldron. You'll often see me write master on a piece, and that's because it's a piece that I don't want to throw away, and it's a piece that I'm going to keep copying. That way I can make sure to replicate it. Now I move on to trim because it's one of the last layers. And this trim I have a tutorial on about how to make custom cosplay trim. I use TNT cosplay foam dowels, and I really, really love them, but they are being used a lot by cosplayers. So I wanted to make sure that I added my own little special twist to them. Layer after layer after layer of these foam dowels, and you get a really cool custom look that is pretty epic once it's all done. I encourage cosplayers to look at materials that anybody can have access to, especially these foam dowels. And it's true, they are amazing. They're so amazing. You should buy them. I'll put a link below. But if a lot of cosplayers are using them, maybe think of a way to think outside the box. And I know that sounds cliche, but how can you change a material? How can you make it your own and make it really cool? And maybe other people might want to copy it. These next pieces I absolutely love. I'm so obsessed with them. You can find out how to make these in my silicone molds video. They are basically pushed into a press mold. You can get a lot of these press molds from TNT Cosplay Supply as well. If you can't find them there, I'm sure you can find them on Amazon. I'll put a link to some below. But anyway, these were pushed in a press mold, and I used TNT's C4 cosplay molding foam, and that product is pretty amazing. And you can create your own foam moldings. So as I mentioned earlier, finding a way to think outside the box, instead of using basic trims other cosplayers are using, maybe consider making your own. And I think that was part of the reason that this piece really stood out, is I used my own pieces. My next piece of advice, especially on a standout piece of armor like this, is to look at it again one more time. I thought I was done, and then I looked at these red pieces that were at a lower elevation and thought I can do more. So then I took these dowels that were not textured to give another look, and I added it on top of where I had previously done the cosplay foam. And I think the look all together is pretty spectacular, and I'm glad I took a step back, thought about it a little bit longer, and decided to add something more. So there you have it, a very quick explanation of how I made this hip pauldron. If you want more, make sure to hit me up in the comments, or if you have more questions about more detail on this particular armor piece, let me know and I'll be sure to answer as many questions as I possibly can. Thank you for watching, and please make sure to hit like and subscribe.